My name is Nicholas Anderson. I'm 21 years old. After graduating from college, I moved away from my hometown and started living alone. My job keeps me pretty busy, and I didn't really have any reason to go back home. However, one day I got assigned to a 2-day business trip. Coincidentally, the destination was near my parents' house. So I decided to drop by and visit. That's when I reunited with Sandra, my father's stepdaughter from his remarriage. At that time, I never imagined that this reunion would become an event that would change my life. Nicholas, I have an urgent request. Can you handle this business trip? My boss asked, and I felt a sudden pressure. A new environment and dealing with problems on my own made the trip a nerve-wracking prospect for me. The destination is near your parents' place, so I thought it might be convenient for you, he added. Hearing it was close to my parents' house eased my tension a bit as it reminded me of the home I hadn't visited in a long time. Get ready as soon as you can. We're counting on you. My boss's comments restored some of my confidence, and I solidified my resolve for the trip. At the same time, I decided to contact my parents. My mother passed away before I started elementary school. My father wasn't adept at juggling work, childcare, and household chores, so I often stayed at my grandmother's house. Life changed when my father decided to remarry. Your new mom is bringing a daughter who is 5 years older than you. Is that okay? He told me, mixing anticipation with anxiety about who was coming. On the day we first met, his new wife was a gentle person, and my worries about a new family quickly faded. Her daughter's name was Sandra. Sandra was a quiet girl with clear, beautiful eyes. We spent our days together as a family, and our bond as siblings grew stronger. However, as we reached adolescence, spending time with an opposite-sex sibling became awkward, and we naturally started spending less time together. What kept things from getting awkward between us was probably our shared hobby and the presence of Max. Max was our family dog. The times I spent walking and playing in the yard with Max and Sandra were just everyday moments, but looking back now, they were happy times. Even now, the doghouse still remains in our yard, even though Max is gone. On the first day of my business trip, after finishing my work, I nervously headed toward the town filled with nostalgic sights. Seeing the old doghouse in the yard brought a smile to my face. When I opened the front door, my father and stepmother greeted me with familiar smiles that wrapped me in warmth. However, that wasn't all. Sandra was there too, with her long hair gently swaying in the breeze coming through the door. She welcomed me with a graceful smile. Even after all these years, her beauty remained unchanged. Hi, Nicholas. Good to see you. How was your work today? She said with a gentle and comforting voice that reached my ears. The tension within me began to dissolve in the comfort of being with my family. That night, we all gathered for dinner, spending time together as a family of 4 after so long. The next day, after finishing my work, I decided to go to the park for a change of pace. As I walked around, I couldn't help but glance at familiar places that held many memories. Entering the park where I used to play, I noticed a couple holding hands approaching from the opposite direction. I saw someone that made me stop in my tracks. Hey Nicholas, it's you. You finished work. Sandra greeted me with the same kind smile as the previous day and introduced the man beside her as her boyfriend. This is Larry, we're dating. Sandra, who is this? Larry asked. He is Nicholas, my stepbrother. He's back home for work. I see, Larry said, extending his hand confidently for a handshake. Feeling a bit awkward, I shook his hand. Sandra's happy expression and Larry's confident demeanor made me feel out of place. Out of habit, I exchanged business cards with Larry and quickly left the scene. On Sunday, my day off, I was still wrapped in my blanket in my old room at my parents' house when Sandra woke me up abruptly. Sandra, why are you here? Seeing her nearly panicking, even more than my groggy self, somehow made me calm down. I slowly sat up in bed and took a deep breath. What's up? What happened? She sat on the bed beside me and opened her mouth with a worried expression. I've been assigned by the principal to explain things to new parents at the preschool. But I'm not confident. I don't know how to get the message across. Sandra is a teacher at the nearby preschool. Because she's dedicated and proud of her work, she's probably feeling the pressure. You'll be fine. You've been a teacher for years now. You're a pro, so explaining things to beginners should be easy, I said, trying to be playful. It seemed to work as her expression softened a bit. First, try to put yourself in their shoes, and then speak with confidence. I explained the presentation skills I developed as a business person to her. I wasn't sure how helpful it would be, but I could see her expression gradually brightening. By the time I finished explaining, my stomach started growling and Sandra noticed. "Let me make you something, or maybe Mom's already made something. Give me one moment," she said as she hurried to the kitchen. Honestly, seeing the usually confident and graceful Sandra in that state made her seem quite endearing. "Mom's made breakfast, so let's go out for lunch. Do you know any good places?" she asked. "A new restaurant opened up a short walk from here. I heard from the moms at the prep school that it's really good because it is kid-friendly." I was surprised she talked about such things, but it made sense given her dedication and the trust she earned from the parents. The fact that she was chosen to handle this orientation was a testament to her character. The restaurant Sandra took me to had a warm wooden interior, a play area for kids, and a menu with a wide variety of dishes. "What should I get?" Sandra pondered the menu with delight. I noticed someone who looked like Larry through the window. It wasn't odd to see him on a Sunday, but it felt off seeing him alone in such a restaurant. Feeling a bit uneasy, I turned back to Sandra. "This looks good. What are you getting?" "I'll have the pasta." "I'll go with the hamburger." By the time our meals arrived, I'd forgotten all about seeing Larry. That night, Sandra and I sat in a corner of the yard reminiscing under the starry sky. Time had flown by as I helped her practice her explanation. "We used to play a lot in this yard, didn't we?" "Right. You and Max used to roll around like a ball." "I miss him," I sighed deeply. "That was probably the happiest time of my life." "I agree with you. Those were happy times. But these moments now are important too." Our conversation paused, and a quiet night spread across the yard. Suddenly, Sandra's arm reached out and touched my hair. "Hey, your hair really is just like Max's, isn't it? I always wondered why you kept patting my head when we were kids. Was it because it reminded you of him?" "Oh, you caught me," she said with a mischievous smile. Her playful side made my heart feel light. That night, I decided to drive Sandra back to her apartment. Her apartment had a quiet, peaceful atmosphere with a small houseplant by the entrance. "Thanks for driving me home. You should come over sometime." "Sure, another time. Good luck with the orientation." "I'll try just the way you taught me," she replied, her smile filled with gratitude, making me feel a bit bashful. However, what happened next was a shock. My business trip was at its midpoint. Even though I hadn't made plans with Sandra for the day, I was curious about how her orientation went and whether it was a success. I decided to invite her to dinner. There was no response when I rang the doorbell. Thinking it might be broken, I knocked on the door but still got no reply. When I turned the doorknob, it opened without resistance. Fearing there might be a burglar or intruder, I clenched my fists and entered her apartment. The place was furnished simply and neatly organized. I quickly found Sandra sitting in a corner of the room, her eyes filled with tears and her cheeks streaked with tear tracks. Trying to calm my racing heart, I walked over to her and spoke softly. "Hey, are you okay? What happened?" She just shook her head silently, not saying a word. Not knowing what else to do, I sat down next to her. I could see her react slightly. After a while, she slowly began to speak. It was all a lie. The despair in her voice weighed heavily on my heart. "What do you mean by a lie?" I asked, and she wiped her tears with her sleeve. She had a pained expression on her face. At today's orientation, Larry showed up. He brought his wife and kids. His name, his job, everything was a lie. I can't believe it. It was all fabricated. Tears started to well up in her eyes again. In that moment, I felt something inside me break, like everything just popped. She continued, her voice trembling. "Nicholas, please, just once." Finally looking at me, she roughly wiped her flowing tears with her sleeve. "Just once more. I want to walk Max's old path with you." She couldn't sleep or stay cooped up in her room in this state. If reminiscing about our childhood could ease her mind, I was ready to go. We walked down the path lined with streetlights, the path we used to walk with our beloved dog. It had fewer vacant lots now. Back then, Sandra matched her pace to mine, but now I was matching mine to hers. This path felt so much longer when we were kids, but it's actually quite short. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was gaining strength. "Max loved you so much. He was really attached to you. He seemed to like Mom too. He was just a ladies' man." Sandra let out a small laugh. That smile left a gentle warmth in my heart. "This feels so nostalgic," she said, reaching out to me. Your hair really does feel just like Max's. It's comforting. Just this once, okay? Sure, I replied. Her touch was delicate, conveying both kindness and sadness. Each time her fingers traced through my hair, something deep inside me began to warm up. I felt my feelings for her growing stronger. I love you, Sandra, I whispered silently in my heart. Memories of the past and her smiling face kept flooding my mind. I realized I was in love with her. It wasn't long after that Larry began stalking Sandra. He showed up at the press school after work, inviting her out to dinner. She refused, but Larry insisted he had to apologize, and she reluctantly agreed. At dinner, he said, "I'm going to leave my wife. I want to be happy with you. Please marry me." His selfish words were unbelievable. I could no longer believe the words of such a man, but Sandra's heart was swayed. She came to consult me, aware of the circumstances. Hearing her story made my blood boil. I pulled out the business card Larry had given me and slammed it on the table. How many lies are written on this card? Can you really trust a man like that when he says he's going to leave his wife? Nicholas, he's a liar who prepared all this for his own selfish reasons. He has a wife and kids, yet he approaches you. That's the truth about him. Sandra's eyes filled with both frustration and determination. I could see she was resolute. Even if Larry lost his temper, I wasn't entirely without confidence. I was ready to confront him to protect Sandra. Thank you, Nicholas. I won't believe him anymore. This ends here. Her hand trembled slightly, but there was new hope in her eyes. Deciding to cut ties with Larry brought a sense of relief to my heart. Nevertheless, Larry persisted in stalking Sandra. He started waiting outside her apartment instead of the press school. When Sandra firmly rejected him, he only smirked. His harassment continued, and when Sandra came to me for help again, she had dark circles under her eyes. This morning, a potted plant was broken by the front door. I had to clean it up. There's no proof it was Larry, but I understand. I'll come with you tonight. As we approached her apartment, Sandra looked increasingly anxious. In the dim light, I could see Larry waiting by the entrance. He stepped in front of me as I walked up to him. Aren't you married with kids? Stop approaching my sister. Larry scoffed with a cold smile and started moving towards Sandra. I pulled her behind me to protect her. If you hurt her anymore, I won't forgive you. Won't forgive me? What are you going to do about it? Larry picked up a child's bat that was lying by the entrance and swung it without hesitation. The sound of the bat striking the concrete echoed loudly. As he raised the bat, his figure was illuminated by the moonlight, his eyes filled with madness, sending chills down my spine. He swung the bat at me. I reacted instantly, using a karate block to catch the bat. The impact sent a dull ache through my right arm. Despite the pain, I didn't take my eyes off him. Holding the bat with my right arm, I struck him with my other hand. He groaned and collapsed to the ground, the bat rolling away. I took a deep breath and kept a close watch on him. He staggered to his feet and walked away from us. As his shadow faded into the distance, the pain and numbness in my arm became more apparent. Once I saw Sandra's relieved smile, I could stand it. The sound of sirens approached, likely called by a neighbor. As I stood there in a daze, Sandra hugged me. A doctor examined me, and fortunately, no broken bones were found in my arm. Still, the bruises and the vivid purple of my skin were hard to miss. Our parents came to pick us up, and both Sandra and I decided to stay at their house. On the way home and after we arrived, Sandra kept thanking and apologizing to me repeatedly. It wasn't until around midnight that we could talk normally. You still remember your karate moves? Yeah, I guess so. Sandra continued nostalgically. Do you remember the camp we went to during the training camp? Of course. That was when you mistook the coach for a ghost or something. You knocked him out with your karate move, right? I'll never forget that. That's something you should forget. She puffed out her cheeks in a slightly shy demeanor. She looked like a child. Do you remember inviting me to do something at the camp? What is it? I tilted my head in confusion. Oh man, you don't remember. Maybe I'll remember if you tell me. That's not remembering. Okay, give me a hint. A hint? Let's see. Under the beautiful starry sky, we did something together. I started to recall something. Was it the time capsule? Bingo. Sandra snapped her fingers in delight. Although I didn't remember it clearly, seeing her so happy made me realize it was an important memory for her. So Sandra, how about we go to the campsite next Sunday? On the day we arrived at the campsite, a gentle breeze made the place feel pleasant. As we dug up the time capsule, memories from the past flooded back, filling me with nostalgia. I think it was around here, Sandra said, thrusting the shovel into the ground. As we dug, an old faded capsule emerged. She eagerly picked it up and began checking its contents. Inside was an old letter I had written as a child. I want to live in a big house with Sandra and have lots of dogs. Sandra's letter was in there too. Today's camp was so much fun. I'm so happy that Nicholas invited me to do the time capsule. Let's stay close forever. I want to spend more happy times with him. We sat at the campsite under a sky full of twinkling stars. Sandra's smile outshone them all. Sandra, I need to tell you something. My heart was pounding in my chest. I really like you. Sandra's eyes widened in surprise as she stared at me. The silence that followed made the night even more still. Even though we're technically siblings, I want to build a future with you. Gradually, her eyes filled with joy and she smiled like a blooming flower. Nicholas, me too. I've always cared deeply about you too. I hugged her tightly. I hope we can walk this path together. Any future with you will be wonderful. With determination in our hearts, we took our first step towards a new chapter. Everything fell into place after that. Nervously, we told our parents and my father said, "If you both are serious, we support you. As long as you're happy, that's all that matters." Sandra thrived as a preschool teacher surrounded by children, and I found success in my career. We achieved our dream of having dogs after we got married, filling our home with smiles. The dreams in our time capsule became our reality. With Sandra's recent childbirth, we now enjoy happy days with our 2 children. My current dream is for our whole family to continue being happy together.